Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Postgame Pints podcast with myself, Mitch Gallo, and Sean Campbell. We're brought to you by LaBrosse and Cunningham's Pub. Usually at this time, I give you all the details of what we're about to talk about, but we're going to keep it very simple today and talk about everything that happened during NHL trade deadline. Hello, Sean.
Hello, Mitch. I thought it was a pretty busy NHL trade deadline leading into it the week before. I know you had the Major Giroux deal. He plays his 1,000th game. And it's funny because he was honored on the game 1,000. Usually players are honored on game 1,001 after you play the game 1,000. They don't usually honor the 1,000 games until you complete it. I know just playing in the game, but he was honored during because they knew he wasn't going to play another game and he gets off. I thought that was a significant deal. But I know locally for you and I with the Montreal Canadiens, it was an incredibly busy day from the when is that Kulak trade going to go down to Lehkonen getting shipped off, and the Canadiens really stocking up that closet full of draft picks and prospects. I thought it was a very busy day, and it did change the way I looked at some of these playoff matchups or potential matchups.
Yeah, and looking at the delay in the Kulak process, Sean, you talk about what a busy day it was. The NHL was backlogged at registry with about 33 deals, and I know there was some complications with the Dadonov trade and a no trade clause. Also, I think it was at 7:25 that we saw the Anaheim Ducks with a deal trading Ryan Kessler's contract. So I know there was some complications with the salary cap and contract statuses and registry trying to figure out all those deals. But everything went through, and it was a busy day, as you mentioned. So let's start with the Montreal Canadiens, and then we could branch out and speak about some of the other trades that could be of significance come playoff time. So we start with the big one for Montreal. The Canadiens trade Artturi Lehkonen to the Colorado Avalanche. The Canadiens get Justin Barron as the big piece coming back in that deal. Sean, what did you think of the Lehkonen trade and how the Canadiens made out?
Well, look, they got a first rounder. I mean, he was a first round pick, and where he is at his development right now, maybe it slid to a second round pick in the minds of Colorado fans. But everybody I spoke with moments after, saying that this guy is destined to be a top four defenseman in the National Hockey League, and he's a big guy, 6'2", and he can skate. Cool. Now I want to see him myself. That's kind of where I am with Justin Barron, but they got that first round pick, a guy that was a couple years ago. They don't have to make the pick. It's a pick that maybe Jeff Gordon and Ken Hughes always liked. There is a connection because they know the family, and they always talk about character. And he's a guy that's played Team Canada. He knows Caden Gooley. Probably still already has his phone number. There's a potential that there's a pairing there. I think there's a lot of good things about this. I like that they're just shoring up their defense prospects. I know a lot of people like the Montreal Canadiens prospects when you get into a Jordan Harris, a Struble, a Norlander, a Gooley, and now you're adding this into the mix, a guy that's a little bit closer. He's got AHL experience. He's going to start in the NHL. He might be able to go down to the AHL and help them. There's really nothing that you don't like here because you get the second round pick too. I would have been upset if the Canadiens just traded Lehkonen for a second round pick. I've been very adamant about that, but they're able to get a first round prospect that's really close to the NHL. This is a pretty neat deal by the Montreal Canadiens, and I'm curious how Justin Barron pans out within the Canadiens organization within the next calendar year. Is it a half and half season next year, AHL, NHL? Is he in the plans for the NHL? Is he motivated to come into a new team where maybe there's just a little bit more opportunity? This is going to be interesting to see how this plays out.
Well, I think you should be pretty excited as somebody who calls Laval Rocky games on radio at TSN 690 because he should be with them for the stretch run and then the playoffs.
A Barron blast!
You're already prepped for that, aren't you? well, good on you. And Sean, look, I'm excited for the Canadiens and Canadian fans with the way that they made out in this deal. I think if you look at the Colorado perspective, they were definitely trying to work out a deal for Claude Giroux and the Philadelphia Flyers. But I think the Flyers wanted to do right by Giroux and send him where he wanted to go and clearly that was Florida. So when that didn't work, the Avalanche turned their focus to some of the other forwards available that could fit and help them for their run at the playoffs, and that's when they went to Lehkonen. By all accounts, Sean, I heard that two guys the Avalanche really didn't want to move were Bo Byram, who has had the injury problems,
Yeah.
but is still a very high end prospect, clearly, and Justin Barron. I don't think they wanted to move this guy. I think Kent Hughes, though, has been a very good negotiator in the process and realized that he was in the driver's seat here. Like, he was in command because he didn't have to make a trade, especially with Lehkonen.
You
A
know,
little
here's
more.
the thing. Just on that, let's just go to Justin Barron for a second, okay?
Yeah.
Because I like your angle that you're going here, because this is what happens all the time, I think, with general managers. Okay, so they're trying to negotiate with the Flyers to get Giroux. That's their priority number one. And they're like, "Oh, can we have Byram?" And they're like, "No, no. Okay, well, what about Barron? Okay, we'll trade Barron if we're going to get Giroux back. Okay, we're going to do that." So then in Colorado's mind, they've already traded Justin Barron, even though they didn't want to, but it was for Claude Giroux. That doesn't go through. Now they're back to square one, but they've already traded him in their mind. They're like, okay, all right, this is what we need to give up to get this guy, even though it may not be worth it. We're overpaying, but I already shipped him off in another deal and it didn't go. So now I'm just like, he's out of sight, out of mind. Sometimes I think GMs think that way because he was part of another deal. Like, if Owen Tippett wasn't part of the Giroux deal, I feel like Owen Tippett would have been traded by Florida no matter what, just because of the way that they were thinking about making trades. Sorry, go back to what you're thinking. I think that about GMs a lot.
No, that's fine. But the point is, I don't think Barron is a guy that they were hell bent on moving. I think they wanted to keep him, and I think there was some other players, lower ranked prospects that they
Yeah.
would have preferred. But I think Ken Hughes did a good job of managing the asset until it was time to trade him. Like, he didn't rush into anything, and he knew the whole time that if a deal didn't come across that he thought was a home run, he wasn't going to swing at the pitch, and he'd take a walk and go to the off season, to use a baseball analogy. So I think he did really well in this trade. I like the deal for Colorado in the short term because Artturi Lehkonen does make them better. I think he will be playing. I think Jared Bednar said he'd be playing with Alex Newhook and Miko Sturm, who they just picked up in
Yeah.
the Tyson Jost deal. I think that's going to be a hard line to play against for the Colorado Avalanche. I'm curious, Sean, how it's going to work out in the offseason for Lehkonen with the arb rights and Colorado clearly not going to be able to fit him in at $4+ million. Nathan MacKinnon is on the last year of his cookie deal at a shade over 6. So they're going to be working on that contract negotiation for 2023 for Nathan MacKinnon. So just I don't know how it works long term for Colorado, because I don't think they're going to be able to keep Lehkonen. I think he is a player who we could potentially see his rights move this summer at the draft if Colorado wants to try to get an asset back that they lost in the deal with Montreal. But in the short term, I like this for Colorado. In the long term, I love this for Montreal.
Yeah, and I'm curious because a guy like Lehkonen, another good playoff run, he had a good playoff run last year, can kind of jump him from a $3 million player to a $4 million player. He could earn upwards of an extra 4-5 million depending on the length of the contract of performance. So he's really motivated, and I like that for Colorado. For going all in, you're getting a motivated player heading into an RFA year. The other deal that the Canadiens made, Mitch, was Brett Kulak. The Canadiens take an NHL player back in William Lagesson. He's kind of going back and forth the AHL, 50 NHL games. That's fine. They get the second round pick, and that's either this year or next year, depending on how far Edmonton goes in the playoffs, and a 7th. Good for you, Ken Hughes. You got a 7th round pick, just extra 3-piece deal. Somebody called a 3-piece deal for Brett Kulak. I don't remember who it was. I think it was me when I was on TSN, and when I heard that he was getting traded, and I did it in jest, and then it happened. It was kind of funny.
Well,
but yeah, but anyways, what do you think of the haul?
I think, Sean, the haul for Kulak was best summed up by Pierre LeBrun on television, who said, I think the quote was, If you would have told me 2 weeks ago that Brett Kulak would fetch you a second-round pick, I would have told you were on crack. That's what Pierre LeBrun said on TSN, which made me chuckle because I think he's bang on there, Sean. I mean, Kulak was an unrestricted free agent to be, and he is not a defenseman that plays in your top 4. If
No,
you're a
he's a
good team,
15-minute
maybe he does on
defenseman.
Edmonton. We'll see. But the value for Kulak was pretty mind blowing. Like I said with Lehkonen, I know that his contract was expiring, but that I don't think that means that Kent Hughes felt he had to trade Kulak no matter what, and I think that was his real good negotiation tactic. Like, listen, we didn't see Chris Weidman move, and he's an unrestricted free agent, so it's not like you have to trade the entire team or get rid of all the contracts that are expiring just because you're not a contending team. So the fact that he used that, I think, as leverage in his negotiation tactics was very smart. And I don't think you could have possibly have hoped for more if you're the Canadians than what they got for Kulak. For Edmonton, Sean, I think he helps them. They're weak on the blue line. I think Kulak obviously skates very, very
Yeah.
well. That ice in Edmonton is the best ice in the league, and I think Kulak will probably look good there. I think he himself probably happy to be going to Edmonton. So you did right by the player, which I think you could never really understate. I think it's pretty important to make sure that when you pull off these transactions, the players are on board. And Edmonton slightly better, but a second round pick for Kulak is just it's wow return for me
Yeah.
for the Canadians.
I kind of look at it's weird. I saw the LA Kings, they pick up Torrey Stetcher and look, Kulak Stetcher, but what you're doing is you're picking up a third defenseman. They did it for a 7th round pick. And is Kulak that much better than Stetcher? He's a different player, but you're going to be trying to get the same kind of minutes from that player. Right? The LA Kings they didn't want to spend money, but they wanted an extra body. Maybe that's such a Marc Bergevin. I know he's not the GM, but such a Marc Bergevin move, the Stetcher. He would have never done it for a 2nd round pick, but then Ken Hughes just played the market, and maybe he was able to drive. He's like, no, we love Kulak, and by saying that last week, maybe he got to a 4th round, to a 3rd round, and then in the 3rd round when he's talking to everybody, everyone's like, oh, I didn't get this defenseman. I need a defenseman that could skate. Oh, Kulak, okay. He gets the 2nd round pick. Then it's okay. Well, I need an NHL player back. I need someone back because look, I only have 5 defensemen. I need someone back. So can you give me somebody? Okay, no problem. Oh, before you hang up, I need a 7th rounder too. I don't know how that happened. What do you? It's like the deal's a 2nd rounder, but there's so many other little elements here that it just goes the way of the Montreal Canadiens. And I'm very curious how this is going to play out long term with Ken Hughes, because that was a good showing for his first trade deadline. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, and Sean, again, I'll look big picture here to what the Canadians were able to do. So Tyler Toffoli was traded. He was a free agent signing, so it cost nothing to get him as far as assets. Use just money, and you ship him off, and you get a 1st round pick and a B level prospect. Then you look at Ben Sherratt, same thing, free agent signing, and you get a 1st round pick, a B level prospect. Then you look at the Kulak trade. They gave up a couple American Hockey League players. They get Kulak in return. The expectations were that Kulak was going to play in the American Hockey League. He doesn't. He plays in the NHL. And then you turn those minor league prospects into a 2nd and a 7th round pick and a player that was placed on waivers a couple times. And then finally the Lehkonen deal. You draft Lehkonen with a 2nd round pick, and you turn that into a player that was drafted in the 1st round and a 2nd round pick. So I just think asset management wise, the Canadians have done fantastic at the trade deadline, because everything they gave up, they acquired for less than what they received to get those pieces in the first place.
And you know what? You could look at their draft and two 1st rounders this year, 2 1st rounders next year, the amount of 2nd rounders that they have coming up, the amount of 3rd rounders. They have 11 picks in the top 3 rounds, the next 2 drafts. And here's the thing. You look at the amount of picks that Arizona has now, and you're like, whoa, like if you, it's tenfold to that, and no one's even come close to that. Even Ottawa has a bunch of picks too. But then you look at the team that the Canadians have on the ice. You already have Suzuki. You already have Romanov. You already have like, Arizona doesn't have that. They have nothing really on that roster just yet. They're just living off of draft picks and they're going that route. Whereas the Canadians, they're building something on the ice and they're building something off the ice. And I do say this, Mitch, and I know that Kent Hughes, he's in a good situation, but his cupboards weren't bare. Marc Bergevin didn't leave Kent Hughes with nothing. There are teams that if they fall flat, there's nothing. I mean, prospect wise or draft pick wise, they have to keep winning with what's on the ice, and that's it. The Canadians have built this stockpile of picks that they can't miss on. Now, we'll see what kind of GM Ken Hughes is when it comes to the draft. You can accumulate all the draft picks you want, but if you can't draft, there's nothing going to happen from it. But I think that they're in a very good situation for next year, the year after, and the years to come for the Canadians. So I think it's pretty good. You want to touch on a couple deals around the National Hockey League here that you thought were significant or went under the radar that you didn't have enough time to discuss that you think will help some teams? I know that some of the bigger deals happened prior to, like the Giroux, the Hagel deal for Tampa, which is such a Tampa deal. Nick Paul. By the way, I did like Matthew Joseph going to the Ottawa Senators. I really like that player. I kind of like that little pickup. I doesn't change them, no, but I kind of like that little move that they did there. I love Tyler Mott and Andrew Kopp to the New York Rangers. I think
I know you're calling on those two specifically.
Yeah. And I just like those. It's to the Rangers. I know they got Braun. They probably prefer to have a Sherrod but I think the Rangers shored up a little bit of playoff toughness because they do have like that top end skilled talent that they lean on so heavily. The Fox, the Panarin, and I like that they got some battle tested players that can do that. I like what the Rangers did under the radar. I don't think they made anything major, but I think that they shored up to be playoff ready. And maybe this is not their year in the East, but I mean, the Rangers are going in that right direction, and I like a little bit moves from the Rangers. I don't know who else you want to jump on here of teams that you thought did well or didn't do well.
Well, Sean, I liked the Penguins getting Raquel and Bolya.
Loved the Raquel deal.
I think that's a real under the radar move too. I love watching West Coast hockey. Raquel's a heck of a player. So that one I liked for Pittsburgh. I like Giordano to Toronto. I think that's a pretty good fit, and I don't think the Leafs gave up a ton to get him. I'm surprised that Edmonton, Colorado, Toronto, Vegas didn't look at their goalie situations. We didn't see goalies move into those cities. That surprised me a little bit.
Well, there weren't too many I just on the goalies. I know everyone's like, oh, you could do this, and everyone's like, Allen could change. I'm like, Allen, is he still a starter? No, he's kind of that. He's going to help your goaltending situation, but are you going to be able to lean on Allen for 4 rounds of the playoffs? Like,
yeah, I know, Sean, but if the cities that I mentioned, maybe Jack Campbell could get back on track with Toronto. I don't know. I think Allen would have been an upgrade, even if he's not a goalie that can carry you 4 rounds, like you're saying. I agree with you, but I think he would be an upgrade on what they have in Edmonton with Mike Smith and Mikko Koskinen.
Yeah.
I think in Vegas, there's just a lot of uncertainty right now with the Robin Lehner situation. There was a report that his season was over. Lehner denied those reports and said it wasn't in fact true. There was another report that it was a broken kneecap, which sounds like a very painful injury. I've never done that. But you would think it would keep you out for some time.
I've had kneecap problems. Yeah,
I know.
I don't think I've broken one, but I've had kneecap problems. It's not.
Can you have a goalie like Jake Allen? It doesn't even have to be Jake Allen. It could be anybody that was available. Sean, come in there until Lehner is good to go, at least to get you to the playoffs, because that team was floundering a bit. It's just what I was wondering about. And then lastly, I mean, we could finish here by touching on the trade that sent Marc-Andre Fleury to the Minnesota Wild, since we're talking about goaltenders right now. That one's a bit of a curious one to me. because they seemed set in goal with Cam Talbot, and now they're going to have this kind of platoon, two-headed monster. Fleury's been part of this with Robin Lehner already, so maybe he's used to it. I think Cam Talbot might be looking at this and saying like, "WTF? Like, what's going on? Why did you trade for a goalie? I thought I was your guy." So, look, I have all the time in the world for Marc-Andre Fleury. Love him as a player. I just was a bit surprised to see that it was Minnesota that ended up acquiring him after all the other teams that had a much more pressing need in goal than Minnesota.
Yeah, I just thought Fleury was going to go to a place where he was going to be the guy, and I know he's older now, but he's been the guy, and that's why I don't mind when you've been the guy. If you're going to be the guy in the playoffs, he would know exactly what it takes, and he might have some ups and downs in the playoffs. So that's why I thought that there was a possibility he'd go somewhere, but he ended up going somewhere where it's going to be another tandem situation for him. And Mitch, you know how I feel about that kind of situation in the playoffs. I just find coaches overthink things. And we saw it with Vegas against the Canadiens last year. It was Lehner and Fleury. And you think that it's one goalie and they have one off period. And then like, change the goalie. So we'll be fine because we changed the goalie. Maybe you should just stick with the one guy and maybe, but then you have to make decisions quicker because it's only a 4-game series. And now here's Minnesota. Whoever starts in the playoffs, if it's Cam Talbot or Fleury, after 2 games, if they're down 2-0, they're going to change their goalie. I promise you. I promise you. And if they're down 3-1, they're going to change their goalie. I promise you that's what's going to happen. And it might be for the better. They'll get that little bit of a boost. But then what happens when you win 2 games is 3-3, and then you get into the game 7? You're like, who's our starter for game 7? That's never a good situation. Any team that has to question their goaltending in a game 6 or a 7 playoff, I'll take the other team who doesn't have to question their goaltending situation. Even if it's a bad goalie, they know who the bad goalie is. So that I'm not a big fan of tandems in the playoffs. I understand tandems can get through seasons and everything. Look, Canadiens tandem pretty much is Price and Allen. I know that, we don't know what the future holds, but it's Price and Allen. But there was no tandem in the playoffs. I know it's Price, but it was Price. You can go 41-41 all regular season one, but when the playoffs come, you don't care. You know it's Price. You're not giving him a night off to Allen. It just doesn't happen. So I'm curious why it was Minnesota. So I'm curious if they're going to split the goaltending or they're just going to give Fleury the reins, say, hey, go have some fun, do this for us. Because you know what? The West is wide open. It really is. And, like Daryl Sutter said, you may not want to face Colorado right now, but other than that, I think the West is open.
All right, Sean. I think we're good on our post-trade deadline podcast here on the Post Game Pints podcast. So, want to tell everybody, well, thank you for listening. We appreciate you doing so, and don't forget to click, listen, and smash that subscribe button. I know that's when you like to smash your screen, Campbell.
It's called a Baron smash.
Bear smash?
A Baron smash.
A Baron smash. Oh yeah,
Justin.
a Baron. I think a Baron blast.
Yeah, but there's a blast and a smash. He's a big guy. He could shoot. He could hit. He could do it all. He's the new Artturi Lehkonen. Can do it all.
Episode 103. Thank you, everybody, for listening.